Good evening, John. How are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thanks very much. So, thank you for joining me on the On Our Minds Only series. I'm really, really grateful you got in touch with me. And based on the kind of bits and pieces that we've kind of been back and forthing before today's recording, I genuinely, and I've said this at the start of a couple of these, I have no idea where this is going. And that's really exciting to me. I always learn a lot personally, both about people and about mental health. I am no qualified expert on mental health. I am just a passionate amateur, but I do genuinely think that hearing other people's stories is really, really beneficial. And I think that's part of the reason why you reached out to be on this. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a big fan actually. I have to say. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sounds
Perfect.
loud and clear.
Yeah. So the why I got in touch was I started watching your videos
Mm,
and I want to start off by saying thank you for the work you're doing because not only are these really interesting and insightful conversations you're having, but as others have said, I think they're really important
mm,
conversations. So thank you for the work you're doing on that. And the other thing, where I started watching your videos and started following you on Instagram, the other thing that I massively appreciated was the Father's Day post you actually posted,
mm,
and you went into a little bit of detail in that around what it means to be a man and masculinity, and
mm,
actually how we should be nurturing and encouraging. And these are just things you don't normally hear, especially the idea of being a man, or and even talking about the roles of men and women, and being actually present as a father, and those sorts of that side of being a man really isn't talked about enough. So just seeing that post, I really felt like I wanted to get in touch, and if there was any way that I could help or get involved, I really wanted to be involved. And I'm such a fan of the channel, the videos you've done so far. So thank you for what you're doing.
Oh no, thank you so much, John. Because I know that on the surface, what I do sounds quite niche, licensed to queer, a queer. When I started doing this just over 4 years ago, I was like, there's nothing like this out there. No one's going to find this appealing, but I'm just going to do it anyway. But queer in the broadest sense is like challenging social norms. So, I know you're a father, and I know there is kind of like this stereotype around fatherhood that you yeah, comes with all those masculine kind of all that masculine baggage to it. But for me, masculinity has always meant more than the stereotypes. So I didn't know you were going to say that, so thank you so much for sharing that as well. I didn't realize how much that had. Sometimes I put these posts out there and you think, is this going to connect with people? But I just do what I always feel is the right thing to do. And so when it comes to Father's Day, I know a lot of people who have interesting relationships with their fathers, not always positive. I know people have lots of, some people don't know their biological parents and all that sort of thing within the kind of licensed queer community, within the Bond community, particularly. So no, honestly, thank you for sharing that with me. That means a lot.
Yeah, and as you say, it's not just fathers; it's role models,
Mm.
it's mentoring, it's anyone that is in contact with younger generation. But yeah, it really resonated because I've fallen into the trap myself of feeling like I need to bring up a strong, resilient son who
Mm.
can look after himself. And somebody else, I don't know if you've heard of Wim Hof, who kind of brought in all the ice plunges and all that sort of thing. But I heard him in an interview recently talking about how he had to create for his children after his wife passed away. He had to create an atmosphere of happiness, joy, and playfulness. And
Mm.
and again, similar to what your post did, it really kind of challenged what you think of as what a male father figure should be, and it really kind of resonated with me, thinking, well, do I do that? Do I create a safe, playful, environment for my
Mm.
son to come home to?
Mm.
So I think anything like that where you're challenging the mainstream, I think is so helpful. And just being present, like you said about, the male, the idea of going out to work and not being around, and so many people really suffer because of that. So just having that authentic presence, taking an interest, I think is so important, and it's such a steep learning curve being a parent. But those things I think are just so important to build that relationship from a young age.
Mm. No, I totally agree with everything you just said. Absolutely. So just tell us a little bit more about yourself, because I know some people already know you from the social media channels. I know you've written a lovely piece for the 007GB website as well, which is actually, I think, first how we sort of got in touch with each other. And then someone read that, and it was actually Alex Lamas, who's been on a previous episode of this series. And then he recorded a video with you, and we're going to touch on bits of that. But yeah, just tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So I've self-published a few books for adults and for children. And being self-published means you don't have to be any good; you can just do it and publish it. And I also do some podcasts. So the main podcast I do is actually for children. It's scary fiction for young children, and this is mainly because of my own son. I started writing this, and it's sort of like grown-up horror for young children. So it's got no violence or gore, but it's not skeleton parties or dancing pumpkins. It's a bit more
Yeah.
grown up horror. But the idea was to have short, bite sized pieces that children could listen to either with parents or on their own, and just to encourage them to start writing, start, stirring that creative pot, and trying to inspire children a little bit more, obviously, to get off the consoles and do other things. But I also do a podcast called Ninja Dad, which is a little bit mental health, a little bit martial arts, a bit around being a parent. It's a bit generous to call it a podcast. It's just me ranting into my phone. And whenever I kind of feel confident enough to put an episode out. So it's quite sporadic. But the biggest one I do is the 31 Tales for October, which is the horror fiction for young children.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I think that describes a lot of podcasts, to be honest. Just talk, To be honest, they're always my favorite kind of podcasts. They're sometimes you listen to some big podcasts and they've got, and you listen to the credits at the end and they've got a massive production team and all that kind of thing. And I'm just like, with me, it's just like, no, it's just me.
Yeah.
And so that's it pretty much. So yeah, no, I'm definitely on the same page with you that one. The article that you wrote for 007GB was about you and martial. Well, it was about Fleming's use of martial arts, wasn't it? So
Sure, yeah.
you're a martial artist like Alex is. That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so I got a black belt in jiu-jitsu. That's traditional style, and I was an instructor for a while as well. So that's been a big part of my sort of identity,
Mm-hmm.
and given me a lot of meaning in my life, whether it's the teaching side of it or just the learning and progression. But I think whether it's martial arts, whether it's creating content like this, whether it's whatever it is, I think having a creative outlet is actually really important. And this is one of the things that I've noticed from your episodes so far. When Alex was talking about how martial arts helped him get rid of his sort of anxiety attacks,
Mm-hmm.
and actually, I think if you can go a step further, I think, and it's given him his identity, his meaning. And I've
Mm-hmm.
heard him talk on other interviews where he said that he got his wife from, sorry, he didn't get, he met his wife through martial arts, probably a bad way of putting it. But so much of the things that he's got in his life has come from that. And I think, look at David Zaritsky, look at, all the things that have come from probably doing his Bond channel, which is not his 9 to 5, but so much of his identity and probably meaning in his life probably comes from that. So I think one of the things I've learned over the years, I think, is how important it is to have a creative outlet. And I think that's why I started getting into writing, actually, because I spent so much time reading other people's ideas or watching other people's ideas. And I'm sort of, when you're watching TV and you think, I could have done that better, or, and I just, one day I just started, and, now I'm podcasting and I've self-published, and it's all come from that. But and again, where I've not been able to do so much with the martial arts now, I've got the podcasting and the writing, and that gives me some meaning and being able to share things with other people and give back. So I think it's really important to have some kind of creative outlet.
I, t-
That
I
can be
t-
anything.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I know you said that as well, when we were messaging a little bit before today, that you said that so part of the kind of sense of meaning comes from being a part of a community.
Mm.
And that being part, you've mentioned, Alex, you've mentioned David, and we obviously know each other. Being the Bond community is a true community, and that was really really important to you as well. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. I was going through quite a difficult time, and I sort of discovered the Bond experience, and I
Mm,
literally, and it was a second time of having COVID as well, so I had no energy at all.
mm,
So
mm,
I was just watching hours and hours of the Bond experience, and so it was through there where I found out actually there's this thing called the Bond community, which I never knew about, and it was one of the videos where I found out about the GB Club. Um, and this is what I was going to get into a little bit in terms of adaptability and
mm,
kind of when you focus your time and energy into the things that you can change and that you can influence, opportunities seem to come to you and
mm,
doors open that wouldn't necessarily have been there before. And what I mean by that is I found out about the Bond Club and the Bond community. So I joined the club. When I joined the club, I found out that you could submit articles. So I wrote an article. Um, and these are all things, I could have sat back and not really got involved or not really spoken to anyone and just joined and got the magazine each year. And that would have been great. And know that I'm sort of contributing to UNICEF. But I wanted to be involved. And because I
mm,
got so much from David's channel, I wanted to be involved. So I wrote the article. First article couldn't go through for very valid reasons. I could have stopped there, but I didn't. I wrote another article that got submitted. And because of that article, Alex reached out to me and he gave me the most positive feedback. And not only that, he didn't even know me, but he invited me onto his channel to talk to him about martial arts and other things
mm,
that we're really into. And that never would have come if I'd have not signed up to the club. If I hadn't have
mm.
signed up to the club, that wouldn't be happening. And if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have started following yourself on Instagram. And I wouldn't have seen your message about if you want to get involved, let me know. I wouldn't have messaged you. I wouldn't be having this conversation with you now and
Mm.
being able to share on a wider platform some of the things that have helped me over my life. So it just shows that when you focus your energy and time into things that you have influence over and you can change, it's quite amazing what doors open up and how your influence grows.
I think that's really important. I've talked with several guests on this series already about control, and a lot
Mm.
of mental health difficulties stem from a lack of control. I know I've spent a lot of time talking to counselors about this. I do have issues around control and fixating too much on the things that I can't control. But what you just said really resonated about focus on the things you can control, but then even if you realize you can control those things, you sometimes you need to be, is courageous the right word? I'm not sure, but you need to put yourself out there, like you sending me that article, which is a great article. If people haven't read it, it's on the 007GB website. All members can access that article. Really great piece about all the different martial arts that Fleming references in the novels. But I think sometimes people are scared to do that and scared to change. Really,
Mhm.
I actually have this is really kind of niche again, but I have a master's degree in change and why people don't change. And the sad reality is that most people would rather die than change something important about their life. If I was to summarize my master's dissertation into 15,000 words into a couple of sentences, that's what it would be. But being adaptable and, putting yourself out there, all those things, and just going for it,
Mhm.
realizing that, you might not be the most successful thing in the world, or it might be, but I'm just going to go for it. People don't people don't generally do that. It actually takes quite a lot of courage to make those sorts of decisions.
Yeah, I wonder how much of it is just people understanding themselves and how much we don't really reflect. I think we just go through life, and I
Mm,
think a lot of the time it's easier to potentially blame sort of outside influences. And the Bond examples I was kind of going to kind of use was so Goldfinger. I've seen people review Goldfinger before, and they talk about how James Bond doesn't seem to have much
mm,
agency in the film.
mm,
He's kind of led from one place to
mhm,
another.
mhm.
And my counter to that would be Quantum of Solace,
Yeah.
where the situation and Bond's reality is continually changing.
Yeah.
And what he is having to do is create opportunities. So obviously he has his fight with the assassin at the start.
Yeah.
That goes the way it does, which means his lead is now gone. So he has to now create a new opportunity. So he goes to the reception, asks if there's any, any messages, and there turns out to be a case. He could have just gotten a flight back to London. That would have been the film over. And then obviously he meets the female lead in the movie
Camille, yeah.
by chance. He takes the chance, gets in the car. She tries to shoot him. Then he tails her and he gives a message to the guy at the gate. So it's just that constantly adapting to the situation as it changes. And I think why that kind of resonated with me a lot, and you picked up on it yourself, is because of because of the genetic defects I have. So I've got a heart condition which was sort of recently sort of diagnosed. So I got both sides of this, because I had the initial reaction of finding out, and I kind of went through those feelings of, why is this happening? It's so unfair. So kind of what happened was, we found out that there's a gene in the family which can affect the function of the heart. And some people in my family just have the gene, no symptoms. My mum has the gene, no symptoms. I've got her to thank for this. But for myself, after about a year of doing some tests, MRI tests and a treadmill test, which I can tell you is very much like the start of Skyfall. I even bought my cis training top for it and everything.
Oh, cool.
It's probably the most unbond moment, going to a hospital for a treadmill test. And yeah, but anyway, so I kind of assumed I probably didn't have any symptoms as well, because I'm fairly health conscious. And then it turned out, actually, so I got a phone call, and this is after about a year of finding out that I had the gene. And in this 5-minute phone call with this doctor, he said basically that I do have scar tissue on the heart. So basically the ligaments between the muscles turns to scar tissue. And when you've got scar tissue, that's no longer functioning part of the heart. So what he basically said to me was, yeah, there is signs of damage. Within the next 5 years, there's a good chance you'll have heart failure. And we want you to have a defibrillator fitted, so permanently fitted in your chest, an ICD. So if that happens, if I go into heart failure, that will give me medical intervention, which I probably wouldn't get. So if I was working at home, say, and then something happened and I'm on my own, I'm not going to get paramedics in time, and it's a good chance it's going to be fatal if that happens.
Wow.
So and then he went on to say that people with my condition tend to live to about 70. So this was all in this sort of 5-minute conversation. And when you're young, you think 70 is quite old, and then you realize actually that's when you retire. And I kind of want to watch my son grow up.
Yeah.
So my initial reactions was very much, I can tell you now, I was Goldfinger all the way. I did not deal with it very well. My initial thoughts were, why is this happening to me? It's not like a lifestyle thing. It's not like I can do more exercise and it will make it better. Actually, what I got told was, the more exercise I do, the more stress I put on the heart, and I need to keep my heart rate below 135. So initially, I kind of had that victim mentality of, this is so unfair. Why is it happening to me? I've got a young son. So I went kind of through all of that. And what my partner pointed out to me was that actually I probably needed to feel those feelings. I needed to probably grieve for the moment and go through that. And that there's no shame in that.
No.
But when I started to come out the other side of it, really it was from these past lessons of okay, rather than asking what I can't do, actually, what is it that I can do? Yeah. And then I needed to start dwelling more within my circle of influence of what I could do rather than what I couldn't. Mm-hmm. Now, my initial plan before I found out about all this, I watched a really good interview with a guy called Peter Attier on Diary of a CEO. And Diary of a CEO is like my religion. I love it because every episode is like a new blueprint on how to live. And I absolutely can't recommend it enough. But Peter Attier was talking about when you're training, and most people just go to the gym or do their training, but don't really have a specific goal in mind. And what he talked about was longevity, the goal of longevity, being the fittest 90-year-old you can be. So when you've got grandchildren, you can still get on the floor and get up again. And this, again, this resonated with me because, you know, I see my granddad sort of in his 80s, and his quality of life is not very good. You know, he's got no mobility. He's very reliant on other people. He's probably recently diagnosed with some sort of dementia. So he's got so many issues. So his quality of life is very poor. So obviously seeing this interview really resonated with me. But one of the big things about longevity exercise is so much is around cardio. so that was my initial plan. So that was my plan. So if we're going to talk about adaptability, this is the plan, right? And then so I start getting back into running, and I'm going out. My friend's dragging me out. We're doing these sort of 5-mile runs. And then I find out about the gene, and then I get the testing done and find out, actually, you need to keep your heart rate below 135 because you could have heart failure.
That's not even that high, is it?
It's not high. I'm probably there now.
I was going to say, I went for it literally just before we started recording this. I went for a run. I'm still in my running gear. And I'm pretty sure I got to 135 within about a minute of starting to run.
Yep. So this is the thing. And I was like, well, longevity was kind of my goal. So I thought, great. Okay. So, but what I started realizing is actually, okay, what can I do? And what I can do, I can still do kettlebell exercises. I can still do calisthenics. I can do lightweight. Heavy weight will get my heart rate up. But I can do lightweight, high reps, which all ties into my longevity, you know, functional mobility, all that kind of thing. So actually, there's a lot I can still do. In terms of boosting my immune system, I can do cold. So I've been doing cold showers or cold immersion. I can do fasting, which is another thing I've been getting into. I see David Zaritsky is also getting into that recently as well.
Yeah, and James Bond is a fan of a cold shower. got to be honest. Not a huge fan, but you know, it's a very Fleming Bond thing.
Yeah, and I talked about that in the other interview where I read about that in like 2008, and now it's all the rage. But that has massively helped me, just turning it cold at the end, and I've been doing it every day. And in terms of resilience and body temperature, because I used to really suffer from the cold, I was really felt the cold, and it's really changed my. It's very odd. It's very weird, but I would.
What does it do then? Having a cold shower.
There's a lot of I'm no expert, and there's a lot of good information out there. But one of the first things I saw about it, Gary Brecker was saying about blood flow to the brain, oxygen to the brain, because of the way you're breathing when you're in that cold immersion, straight away you're getting oxygen to the brain, which if anyone suffers from brain fog or any of these things when you get to a certain age, there's a lot of health benefits. There's supposed to be a lot of immune system benefits as well, but again, I'm no expert on that.
I will promise to give it a go, John. You report back.
Start with a warm shower, get yourself nice and warm, and then but yes, there's a lot of things that I can do, and that really, and I think if I was a psychologist looking at this, because I started doing the fasting, getting into trying to cut out caffeine and sugar and things like that. And if I was a psychologist, I'd probably say I've gone from feeling like I've got no control over a situation whatsoever. And if you look at, say, fasting, well, now I can control what I'm eating and so maybe on the face of it, that might seem a little bit maybe unhealthy. I'm not sure. But I think for me, it was an element of taking back some control over the situation, because it was like this thing that was going to happen to me. There's not a lot I can do about it. I need an operation. So it's going from being a victim almost to, okay, well, what can I do rather than what can't I do? And a bit like this podcast, this is how, this being here now on this channel. So I don't want to dwell on this being an exercise thing or a medical condition thing. I think when you dwell on the things that you can influence and the things you can change, that is applicable to your relationships, to how you live your life, to every aspect of your life. If you're unhappy at work, okay, rather than sitting there for 7 years going, I absolutely hate my job, it's everyone else's fault, my face doesn't fit, I can't get a promotion. What can you do? What things can you do to be there when the promotions come up? What can you do to help your mood? Is it putting a picture of your dog on your desk because that helps your well-being when you're sat there for 7 hours a day? Is it is it playing 80s music on the way to work? Is that going to help your mindset when you get there? It sounds like stupid. It sounds a bit silly, but all these little things add up. And when you have that mindset of, well, what can I do?
Yeah.
What can I affect? It really makes a huge difference. And as I said, that's why I'm here now with you, because I focused on the things that I could do. And I've got a podcast with hardly any listeners, as I say, just me talking to my phone. And now I'm sharing these things on your platform. And this is the power of focusing your energy and your time on the things you can influence. And that circle of influence gets bigger the more time you dwell in it, and the more time you spend outside of it, saying, well, I can't go running because it's raining, or I haven't got the right running shoes. All the time you do those things, and you give away control of the situation. I think time just goes by, and 10 years later you'll just be left with regrets, I think. So I think sorry for dealing with adaptability, the key thing really is what can I do, and dwelling in where you have the most influence.
I think that's really profound, actually, John. And so much of what you just said does resonate with me. And it's made me realize, actually, that I have worked sometimes in terms of work life as well as personal life. I've had situations where I know I can't control things. My big thing with depression in my early 20s was about something I couldn't control, which was my sexual orientation. And because I spent so long focusing upon that, that's what was making me really, really ill. But at the same time, I was being quite successful professionally. I was starting out in my education career, and that side of things I could control. And it was actually because that side of my life was going really well. The part I couldn't control was an absolute, dumpster fire. It was actually horrendous. But because the stuff I could control, that actually in the end gave me the confidence to kind of make important life decisions, i.e., coming out and being a lot happy, choosing to be a lot happier. And that actually, because I invested so much time in the things that I could control, the things I couldn't control actually got better in the longer term. And it's only talking with you now that I kind of realize I did that. So this is why I love these podcasts, because you sit here thinking, oh God.
Every episode I come away with something new. And like you say, that's what's so good about this. And there's so many different perspectives, but I'd actually love to hear more about that. I don't know whether you're planning on having anyone from that community, sort of more people from that community on the channel, because my friend he came out in secondary school. And I don't know quite whether we're sort of a similar age, but I know for him it was secondary school was just not a great time. And I don't think, unless you were that person or you were close to someone like that, I don't think people understand really what a hell that really could be. But I'm really glad you brought up negative thought patterns, actually, because sorry, you didn't. You brought up depression.
No, it was. I kind of got into, and I think what you said as well was really important about you've got your example of something you can't control. I've got my own example. I'm sure people listening to this have already kind of clicked and gone, hang on, there's something in my life I can't control, whether it's personal, professional, whatever. This is not about the specific, well, it is for you because you're the guest on today's episode, but this is not necessarily about the specifics of individuals. This is about breaking those negative thought patterns that we all have. It isn't really about the specific kind of scenarios here, is it?
And this is what I was saying earlier, why I think that some people, you said some people choose to just stay. And I wonder how much this comes down to some of the basic education. So some of these things I've learned over the years, this isn't me. I haven't come up with this stuff. I've learned this over the years from other sources, other places. And I kind of think that that's why these messages are so important. And like the things that John was talking about on the other episode, about the I love the train station analogy when he was talking about thoughts, and you're standing at a platform and it's just a thought, and that letting that train go, and and that was such a brilliant analogy. But one of the big reasons I wanted to come on here was because you and Alex were talking about the late teens, early 20s, male depression,
Yeah.
which straight away I'm like, yeah, tick, had that. And it feels like that's almost a bit of a pattern. I know the charity you work with
Yeah.
is younger males, is it? I believe.
It's Papyrus is prevention of young suicide. They go up to it's any gender, but up to the age of 35.
Okay, yeah, but so I don't know whether it might be the same for women as well. But there seems to be a pattern with men, certainly that younger age, and I was no exception. And there were things that I learned afterwards that kind of would have really helped me at the time. But it was this kind of so with the thought patterns. So what I learned afterwards was that your brain is very much like a computer. So when you're telling yourself over and over again, I don't know, the world would be better off without me. When you tell yourself that over and over again, you program yourself to start to believe it. And not only do you believe it, it becomes a logical, reasonable conclusion.
Yeah.
It makes sense. And you start saying, well, my friends and family, they'd be better off without me. And you tell yourself that to the point where that is a reasonable thought and it makes sense and it's logical. And what happened with me, I won't go into too much specifics or anything, but so when I finally sort of went to the doctors, there were other things happening at the same time. So I had to I got myself signed off work for a couple of weeks because one of my quite an important relative, basically, she was in the hospital dying. Literally, probably she had already gone. And it was that period where you're just waiting basically for the body to switch off. And this coincided with a bout of depression that I probably already had. So I went to, and my work at the time were really awful and just not helpful at all. So I got myself signed off and I basically went and sat in a hospital room waiting for this person to pass away. But when I but that kind of forced me to go to the doctors, which I probably wouldn't have done. And when I voiced these thoughts aloud to the doctor, I suddenly realized how off track I was, how my thoughts, those thoughts that made sense to me for so long, all of a sudden I realized that's not right. That's not normal. That those thoughts they're not correct. That's not right.
Yeah, yeah.
And I wonder how many young people have this similar thing where they sort of program themselves. And when you look at there's a scary sort of population of males today who are very misogynistic. And is it the incels? Is it?
Incels, yeah.
So again, I kind of wonder how much they are programming themselves with these repeat thoughts, and I wonder whether this ties into sort of suicide with young people. But what I learned afterwards was that because it's like almost like a computer, you have to interrupt the thoughts, and what worked for me might not work for others. But so you take a word or a catchphrase, and when you start having these thoughts, so mine, because it was the whole computer analogy, I used the word delete. So as soon as I started getting one of these thoughts and I identified, oh, I'm having one of those thoughts again, I would say delete. And what would happen, and you can say it aloud, you might sound a bit weird if you're at the bus stop or something, or you can just say it, in your head. And what you'll probably find is that thought, because you're thinking about it, that thought will come straight back. And you might have to say delete again. You might have to say delete up to 10 times, but then you'll force yourself to start thinking about something else and you're interrupting that thought. So this became very important for breaking those thought patterns. Now, the other brilliant thing I heard recently, very recently, again, I wish I'd known in my 20s, was accurate thinking. So rather than positive thinking, accurate thinking. And what that is questioning your thoughts. I'll give you an example. So my son's a big FIFA fan, or FC as it's called now, apparently.
No.
And I constantly hear him saying, "Oh, I'm so rubbish at tackling. I'm so rubbish at tackling." And then I'll say to him, "But is that true?" I'll watch him for a minute, and he'll make 5 out of 6 tackles, but for every one tackle he gets wrong, oh my God, I'm so bad. I'm so terrible. And I've started saying to him, "Is that true? Is that true?" And it's this idea of questioning your thoughts. So when
Mm,
you think
mm.
something that's such a generalization like that, and you say to yourself, okay, well, actually, is that true? And we really need to question our thoughts. And I think this ties in nicely with what John was saying about, not being controlled by your thoughts,
Yeah.
and whether it's just allowing that thought to pass by.
Mm,
And
mm.
all these things tie together so well. But
They,
but again, with the younger people, I wonder how much that comes down to having that sense of meaning and identity and that creative outlet at that younger age. Because at the time, I think I spent a lot of time wondering what the point of everything was. Um,
I'm still trying to figure that one out, John, to be honest. No, no, no. It's in all seriousness, the meaning of life and all the rest of it. It's like, but as I've talked about with a couple of people, it's what meaning you make of it, isn't it? Really?
I think so.
Yeah, and I know that sounds like kind of a motivational slogan that you put on a wall or something like that, but it's so true. It
But I
is.
think it is as simple as
Yeah,
that. I
yeah,
think it
yeah.
is because I think you won't find the meaning to life in a religious text. I don't think you'll find it externally. I think you need to
Mm,
look at. I think it's such a subjective thing, and I think so much of our meaning comes from how we identify ourselves, and like you said earlier, even about community, your identity comes from the people around you and your
mm.
community. And that's why I think creative outlet is so important. And again, when you were talking to Alex, what he's got from what his identity or how he identifies himself. Same with David, talking about relevancy.
Mm.
It all to everyone. Everyone seems to be having a very similar experience, but
And
you know
that's why I called this series On Our Minds Only. It was a hypothesis, there's a question mark there, because I'm like, okay, surely, because I'd already had a few chats with a couple of people before starting the series, like Blake and Alex, and we were sort of saying the same things to each other, but no one was saying these things openly. So I thought, right, let's put it out there as a hypothesis. How many of these things do we have in common? And it is amazing. You're absolutely right. The links that, and it's great that you've listened and watched every episode so far, because you're making the links, just like I'm making the links here. But the last couple of episodes we have, or at least a couple of recent episodes, we've talked about young men sadly taking their own lives at the age of, I think John's friend was 19. The person that Natasha knew was around the same age. A lot of people have really depressive episodes in their early 20s, like Alex talked about, and I've talked about, and you've talked about. It seems to be that, and I know there are some statistics, like suicide is the biggest killer of young men. We all know that. But I'm not sure if there is any research. I'll have a look into it after this, maybe. But around that age of 19, 20, when people are working out who they are,
yeah,
in every possible sense, but as I say, personally, professionally, it seems to me that men are not very well. Oh, I don't know. Is it the programming that they have as kids, and then moving into adulthood, they kind of struggle with making those transitions because they're not sure, they're almost fighting their programming in a sense.
yeah, that's a very good question.
I'm not sure there's an answer there, but
I know,
it's
yeah,
it's something you've got me thinking about it. And also, you talked about going to a doctor when you recognised that you were having these negative thought patterns,
mhm,
and you almost sense checked them with a doctor, like you would with a counsellor or someone else. I write them down whenever I'm
brilliant,
having getting negative thought patterns. I write them down, and then
brilliant.
even the next morning, sometimes I'll look at what I've written down and I'll go, well, that's a bit ridiculous, isn't it? But at the time it feels really real, and some really dark stuff sometimes. But you made the decision, and talking about adaptability, you also used the phrase earlier about taking chances. It's almost like going to a doctor or talking with people about these things for a lot of men still seems quite risky,
Yeah, yeah,
and it
yeah,
and it takes a lot of mental fortitude for us to actually get to that point where sometimes it's almost too late, we're really far down the line, but we just keep it to ourselves far too long and it's still going on.
yeah. I think you give me more credit for sort of sense checking, because it wasn't till afterwards, till I got out of the surgery, that I even I had that realization
Right.
afterwards, really, and it doesn't have to be a doctor. I can be speaking to,
Yeah.
anyone, but absolutely, we need to talk more. But the other, I think the other side of it. So part of my issue was that I didn't have anything major. I mean, I did towards the end when I got signed off there, but I think a lot of the time I felt like I had no reason to be depressed. I had no excuse to be depressed. I didn't deserve to be depressed. Therefore, I didn't try and seek help or try to make an improvement. And what do you do? So I don't know. Let's talk about exercise. So if you're I don't know, if you've got a weak left arm, okay, you work it out, don't you? You work out, you
Yeah.
work on that. But mentally, if you have an issue mentally, we don't do the things that are going to help. We tend to bottle that up, keep it inside. um, a lot of my issue, as I said, I didn't feel like I had any reason to be depressed, therefore I didn't deserve to be depressed, therefore just get on with it. What we need to really be promoting is whatever people decide to do, whether it's trying antidepressants, whether it's talking to a doctor, whether it's trying counseling, whether it's, I don't care what it is, but what we need to promote is actually recognizing that something isn't right and
Hmm.
trying to make an improvement and getting outside help to make an improvement to whatever that aspect is. That is strength. That is
Yeah.
courage.
Yeah.
That is being a man. That is bravery. To bottle it up, not deal with it, like so many. That's not the brave choice. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of, a bit like uh, the lady on the last episode was saying, it's that kind of stoic, stiff upper lip. That's kind of the mentality. Well, actually, if something isn't right, we should be going, well, this isn't right. What should I
Hmm.
do? Should I listen to some podcasts and try and understand a bit more about what's going on? It could just be a little bit of research, or you write things down. I had a period of time where I had to make some changes, and I started journaling every night. And, you know, it's probably the same as talking to someone. You probably get the same effect from it, whatever it is. But if you want to make a change, you need to do those things, even if it's small things. It might be small things like
Hmm.
just at the end of the night before you go to bed, jot down a few of your thoughts or
Hmm.
how the day went, or choosing to listen to, as I say, 80s music because that's the happiest music on, listening to 80s music rather than heavy metal in the morning.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, those small
Yeah.
changes can make a big difference. So I think we need to promote this idea that self-improvement actually is a courageous thing. Saying something isn't right, my thoughts aren't right, I need to do something about that.
Hmm.
That's bravery and strength. And I think we need to promote that, which I
I
think is
think.
what you're doing.
Oh, well, yeah, that's the aim anyway, John. But I loved your analogy earlier on, um, about of using Goldfinger and Quantum of Solace,
Mm,
because you could argue that Goldfinger is obviously a much happier film, um, than Quantum of Solace. Where Bond is constantly making not necessarily the right choices, but he's being a much more active participant in that story. And yes, he doesn't understand the big picture, so he makes mistakes, but he's constantly adapting. He's having to
mm,
do that just to kind of keep going. He's really going through it mentally. Whereas Goldfinger, he's quite passive in terms of that story. And yes, Sean Connery exudes cool effortlessly, but that's so much more of a fantasy reality. And we love watching a Bond film for the fantasy reality. Of course we do. But if we were to kind of, it's probably, certainly I probably, live my life too much in the template of James Bond. But I think Quantum of Solace, in some ways, not all, but in some ways, is a much better kind of example of how we should probably face challenges in life.
mm. Absolutely. And it's funny that you talk about your issues with control, and
Mm.
sort of I probably feel a little bit the same. And do you think that's why we like to emulate Bond? It's that element of control, isn't it? You watch these films and you see, people that have so much agency and control over everything around them.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that's probably why we so many people in the Bond community that probably don't feel that level of control and helplessness kind of within their own lives. And I think that's why a lot of us turn to these things. I mean, look at Alex. he said he became an archaeologist for a bit after watching Indiana Jones. And I mean, there's got to be an element there of just emulating these people, because it's that sense of having control over the things around you in your own life. And I think so much of it comes back to that.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, to be honest, John, because a lot of people, I always kind of rail against the individualist and that interpretation of Bond, because he always needs allies and all the rest of it. But it's
Yeah,
still, a lot of Bond stories do play into that fantasy of, and some of I'm almost going into trailer voice here. Only one man can save the world, and in reality, there are no, there are some individuals through history who have made a seismic impact on, thousands or millions of people, both positive and negative, but they're very few and far between. But
absolutely.
I think it probably does play into less so power, perhaps, but more a control
So,
fantasy-ness, that James Bond can control whatever situation he's in and not feel those waves of anxiety that, are natural, but we would perhaps like to suppress or pretend we don't feel. So I think you're dead right.
yeah, and it's kind of disappointing, isn't it, when you try and deal with a situation as James Bond would, and realize actually real life doesn't work like that. So I think there's also a little bit of an element of danger to the kind of emulation and the role models that we look up to, especially in movies and TV.
I
Because
get
as we know,
exasperated when I walk into a bar and no one knows how to make a martini. So I'm just like, there, there goes the James Bond fantasy out the window. That's how fragile, control is in real life. Never mind.
absolutely.